wood or PVC, you always want to have internal structures to support your props. So inside these, and I'll show you some pictures in a second of the internals of this, I have wooden dowels running throughout this prop, and in this one, the handle's PVC, but I have wooden dowels running in through the inside of it. Yeah.
So are you putting wooden dowels through the foam?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, so inside here there's a channel that I've cut out, and then I cut through the PVC, and I have wooden dowels going crosswise, and that's to keep it from turning. So you can try gluing the PVC or wood to the insulation foam, and it will hold, but as you move your prop, as you have wear and tear on your prop, it's going to break loose eventually. It's not a permanent bond, because you can't permanently bond those things to insulation foam. And so it's going to eventually start twisting on you. And then that's going to wear and erode, and it's eventually going to fall apart. So by having those cross beams in there, you're going to give it more structural support and keep it from turning and wearing down your foam. And this one has such weight to it and so many different things, like there's a dagger that comes off of here, and pieces that come off here. It really needed the counterbalance. So you have to kind of think about where's your weight distribution going. You need to have counterbalances, otherwise carrying this weapon, it's going to be top heavy or bottom heavy. So you have to consider your weight proportions. So I have a wooden, this is actually a wooden handle going all the way through, and then I have a wooden crossbeam coming across that I've screwed in. You're going to need power tools. If you want to make big props, you're going to need power tools. If you don't have access to some, maker spaces are a great place to get them. You don't need expensive tools. None of these tools are crazy expensive. All of these tools are under 20 bucks. You're going to need a Dremel. So if you work with EVA, you should have a Dremel. I get mine on Amazon. For this one, I upgraded because it has a router function. It was $30. The one I had before this was $20. You don't have to spend a ton of money on a router. Dremel, sorry. What I like about this one is it has a handy little mini drill bit that attaches to this so I can get into really fine areas. Just trying to get to fine details with this big thing it's cumbersome. This makes getting your details a lot easier. So look for Dremels that have this kind of adaptation to it. You're gonna need a heat gun. Harbor Freight, who's your best friend? 17 bucks. You need a heat gun. This is to heat seal your EVA foam. You can use it for Worbla if you're gonna be using Worbla. Worbla is another great it's a thermoplastic. So you heat this up, it gets really, really soft and malleable. And then once it cools, it hardens in that shape. My hilts at the bottom are insulation foam covered in Worbla. They are not finished. I have to go back and cover them in Bondo to clean them up, but I wanted to get it done in time.
Say that material name one more time.
Worbla.
Did you add that to add like more strength to the?
Because of the shape,
okay.
The EVA, because these are wrapped. This is insulation foam wrapped with 2mm EVA foam. Honestly, I was con crunching to get it done for this convention. And I did not have time to wrap the EVA. The EVA takes a lot more time to wrap around those curves. Right. And I just wanted to throw something on there. So I was like, oh, I have a roll of Worbla sitting in the corner. I'll throw this on, and this is super easy to work with. It does work, but once it even melts down, it gets like you can see it, it's kind of bumpy. And smoothing it out, it's a lot of work to smooth Worbla out. This has a lot of finishing work. So if you're gonna work with Worbla, give yourself time, because there's a lot of finishing work to this stuff. But it is great, but it is a thermoplastic, so if you leave this in the car, even if it's not even that hot, it will melt and just collapse. So you have to be careful with Worbla. But I like to use it occasionally. It's also very, very expensive. I mean, I have one roll of it and it was $50. It's very, very expensive.
Quick question, what would be like a really good use case for using Worbla?
So if I had a plug, I could show you how this stuff works. I don't know if there's a plug around here or not. James, can you see if there's a plug to plug my heat gun into? Okay. I'll show you how this stuff works. So you can melt this down and you can use it to put into molds to make little armor details. You can use this if you need something that's really thin but very sturdy and hard, almost like a PLA, but you can't print. This works really great. You can use this for armors, like lots of people do make armors out of Worbla. I really only use it occasionally. The main reason I have Worbla is I use it to support in my wigs and in my hats. So, for instance, this chopper hat, these little guys, See, does this one come off? I gotta take it off. Get them off. That one's stuck in there. They come off. I promise, they come off. Nope, it's not gonna come off. Okay, they were meant to come off. But inside here I have Warbler that is attached to PVC, and these are on PVC couplers, and they're attached on. But they are now like, I left it in the car, and I think they like heat formed to it. But yeah, these can come off. And I use Warbler strips under my wigs to help with pigtails. If I'm building ponytails or pigtails, I use those underneath as bracing, as well as wire. And so that's what I use Warbler for, because it can make like a great little thin headband that doesn't add any extra weight to your wigs. And you can heat form it, so it forms really nicely on the inside of props as well.
So people live in Texas and it definitely gets hot. What is the best way that you found to kind of help preserve these props that you build to not have them?
The melting? That's why I don't use Warbler very often. I use it very, very sparingly, usually for, again, internal supports, things I'm not going to be leaving out in the heat. If you're walking around outside, it'll be fine. The problem is if you just leave it sitting in direct sunlight, that's going to be the problem. So, like, I had a friend who made this really pretty peach armor, and she sent it outside to spray paint it, went inside, came back out an hour later, she forgot about it, and it had melted onto the pavement. Because she left it, it was like 85 degrees outside, but she left it in direct sun in the middle of the day, and it just shoop down, and she was heartbroken. But yeah, that's the only thing to be worried about. So as long as you're not leaving it in a car and leaving it in direct sun, it's typically fine. Let's see. You're gonna need, again, all your different heat tools. If you're gonna be using insulation foam, you need one of these guys. My wire's missing, but it's a wire cutter. This is like $15, $20 on Amazon. This little wire that goes in between here heats up, and it cuts through the insulation foam like butter. Like it just melts, just right through it. This does take a little bit of finagling to figure out how to work it, because this wire is flexible, and so as you're moving it, it does have flex. So what I do when I'm cutting out my props is I go, where I've drawn my lines, I cut right outside the line and sand down, so in case I have some wobbling, because I naturally just have a shake. So when I'm cutting, and if I have any waving, I'm not cutting into my pattern, I can sand that down, because this stuff sands really, really easy. Really, really easy. And then also, if I'm cutting at a bevel, I take a piece of EVA foam, and I get like little pins, and I pin along my edge, and then run across, so I have basically like a guide, like a plane. And that's how I get these nice, crisp areas on my blades. But you're gonna need one of these, because if you try to use a utility blade like you would for EVA, it's going to dull it faster than you ever thought EVA could dull your blades. I mean, I'm talking like one swipe, and your blade's not gonna be dull. It's really, really abrasive. And it's gonna take forever. It's gonna take forever, because this stuff's an inch thick. This comes in inch thick sheets. And if you use a utility blade, you usually have to go through it a few times, and it's gonna be a really rough cut. Really rough cut. Like, as you can see how clean this is, this was cut with the wire cutter. This is just a scrap piece I have. So it cuts really nice and clean. Let's see. Paints, automotive, fillable and sandable primer is your best friend. Buy the case. That's what I use to prime. After I finish priming, that's what I use to lay my base down. It's sandable, it will fill in little things. A lot of people, and a lot of cosplayers that do tutorials will tell you, oh yeah, you just use Plasti-Dip. I hate Plasti-Dip. One, it's expensive. Two, it's not beginner friendly. Once you lay Plasti-Dip down, if you come back and let's say you didn't sand something perfectly smooth but you thought it was smooth, or you didn't fill in that gap perfectly and you see it afterwards, it's done. You're stuck with it. Because once Plasti-Dip is laid down, you can't sand it, you can't modify it from there. So I don't like recommending Plasti Dip. I don't work with Plasti Dip very often. There are some small things I'll use Plasti Dip for if I need something super flexible. But I've discovered some other materials that are better, that are flexible as well. I keep it around in case I need something really fast, like I need something, I'm con crunching and I have a little detail I need to get primed and sealed. I'll use it in a quick burst, but I typically stay away from Plasti Dip. It's just too expensive. It's not economical. I have friends who we get in what would you call it? We're both gonna die on their hill. Like they're gonna die on their Plasti Dip hill. I'm gonna die on my non-Plasti Dip hill. And it's fine. People can use it if you like it. Continue using it, but I don't think it's beginner friendly because there's other things you can use, other products you can use that will allow you to go back and fix your props if you made a mistake. My favorite one for beginners, it's super cheap, is Mod Podge. Specifically the glossy one, Mod Podge. There is a trick to using this because I've had cosplayers say, oh, I've tried it, it doesn't look good, it's rough, I don't like the finish, because you're not doing it right. This is what I use to prime all of my props. So I've gone through the process, I've gone through the sanding, I'm ready to prime, and I apply a bunch of Mod Podge with a flat brush. I apply about 3 coats, and then I'm gonna take automotive sandpaper. I start at usually 320, and you're gonna wet sand the Mod Podge. You're gonna wet sand it, it's gonna get pasty. It's gonna get real pasty. That's what you want. And you just wet sand the whole thing, and you wipe it off. And let it air dry for a little bit, and then you're gonna apply 3 more coats. And you're gonna do that process 3 times. You will get this finish when you're done with that. It will be nice, it will be soft, it will have a flex to it. It will look like you Plasti Dipped it, except it'll be clear, because it dries clear. But it will feel like that. I have people who come look at my props, they're like, oh, you use Plasti Dip, don't you? No. This guy, Mod Podge too. I don't use Plasti Dip. It takes longer than Plasti Dip. It takes some time, because you have to let the Mod Podge dry, wet sand it, and repeat that process. And if you're doing something like this with all these details, it's a long time of sanding. It's a lot of sanding. But if you find an error, you can still fix it. If you find a mistake where you didn't fully sand it right, you can fix it. And then once you do that, then you can apply your automotive sandable primer. Oh, yes.
I have a question about, and this can apply to painting steps as well, or sealing, but maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but like, how do you break stuff so that it dries off the ground? You don't have to like, paint one side and flip it over and then like, paint the other side.
For big stuff, you just have to do that.
Yeah.
For smaller stuff, I have like an airbrush booth, and I also just have hooks. I'm remodeling my house, and so I have just an area where I have hooks hanging from the ceiling, and I can just like suspend stuff in the air when it's drying. Because I've done that that's how I did these guys, and I have pictures to show that. But yeah, usually there are some little things you can get for like, they're expensive, but people who do painting, like house painting for doors, is this little device where you can like, it props them up, but it doesn't actually touch it, and allows you to flip them, but they're kind of expensive. But you just have to do the kind of flip method, unfortunately. And that's why it can take a while.
Quick question on Plasti. I have not used it before. But what is stopping you from trying to fix it and then Plasti Dip in a second? I don't know if that's...
So Plasti Dip's like a rubber, so you can't sand it. So if you didn't sand something perfectly down, you can't go back and sand it. It's just not going to do anything, or you're going to rip it off completely. And then you're going to have an area where and when it rips off, it could possibly pull a chunk out of your prop. So that's the issue with Plasti Dip. It does not sand at all. So once you put it down, it's the final thing you're doing. So if you find any errors, if you find gaps, you can go back and fill them with gaps and cover it again. But if you messed up something sanding, or you didn't get something perfectly even or level, you're stuck with it with Plasti Dip. With Mod Podge, you can go back and sand. You can sand it all the way off if you need it to. It's also going to build up too, and because it's water based, so the water's going to reactivate it. And then you do the sandable primer filler. That will fill in little micro gaps too, and then you can sand that down as well and get a really nice, clean, smooth layer. And what's nice about that is, especially if you're a beginner and you're making props, learning how to make something perfectly sanded smooth does not happen instantly. It takes time. It takes messing up. It takes figuring out what that actually feels like. Because when you're looking at it, you've got foam, you have EVA, you've got your gap filler, you have all these different colors. It can mess with you. It's like an optical illusion where you think it's smooth, but it's not smooth. Or you think it's rough, but it actually is smooth. And so until you put your solid coat layer on, which when I show pictures here in a second, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's hard to see where something's smooth and where something's not smooth. And so until you can get to that skill where you can just feel it and learn that, you're gonna have mistakes. And so what's nice with the Mod Podge is if you're building up layers of it and then adding the fillable primer is going to give you layers and help it gives you a little bit of clearance to have some errors because you can just sand them down and you still have a nice thick coat. So it's gonna help kind of mask those beginner errors that you can have in your prop building process. And then for finish paint, you can use whatever finish paint you want. The only thing is if it's gonna be flexible, you need it to be like armor flexible, don't use any paints with hardeners, don't use any enamels. You want to use something that has some flex. You can either add flexible things, like I think Plaid FX makes a flexible primer. You can pour that into your acrylic paints and it'll make them more flexible. There's different things that you can do, and some of them just are flexible. But if it's not flexible, if it's rigid like this, you can use whatever paint you want. You want to use the 99-cent craft paint? Go for it. I use it all the time. There's nothing. You don't have to use some fancy, expensive paints for props. Just know that if you're not using a flexible base paint, you could have cracking if it bends. So you want to make sure that you're using something that could be flexible if it needs to flex. The other thing to keep in mind is, let's see what time it is. Okay, accessibility. What's your budget? You can get really, really expensive with these props. Really expensive. What is your budget? Like I said, these tools aren't expensive. The materials aren't always expensive, but you have to buy a lot of them. Plan that out. Actually calculate what you're going to need and plan within your budget. How is this going to be transported? I am fortunate enough that my car got totaled and I had to get a new car, and it was a perfect opportunity for me to get a cosplay mobile, and so I got a big SUV to transport my props. But if you don't, how are you going to transport them? That's the reason this is in pieces. This from here to there is the exact length of the back of my car to behind the front seat, with all my seats laid down. That guy fits in there perfectly, same length. You need to be able to calculate how you're going to transport this, what resources you have, and build your prop that way. So if you only have 5 feet of clearance in your car, or whatever you're using to transport, you need to be able to make your prop modular if it's bigger than 5 feet. There's lots of different ways of doing that. PVC, you can have joints. You can have wooden dowels with screws that screw into each other. There's lots of different things, and you have to get really creative here. You gotta do some engineering. You gotta do some engineering and have a little bit of creativity. But you have to break up your parts. Before these were JB welded on, like these were originally came off to be transported. And then what tools do you have access to? Again, I'm fortunate enough, I live in the country. I have lots of tools because we're remodeling our house, so we have a ton of tools. And I have a nice workspace to work in. Where are you working? Because these materials are messy. This can be very, very messy. This is not a clean hobby. If you're someone who likes to have a clean workspace, this isn't a hobby for you. This is messy. Especially if you start doing the kind of like cutout details like I have here, using a Dremel, a router to go in and route out the design and cut out like this. It gets messy. There's particles everywhere. I had to dust for 3 weeks to get all of the dust materials out of my living room. But keep that in mind when you're working. What spaces do you have to work in? If you don't have a workshop, if you're in a room, just plan that you're gonna have to clean up. Maybe if you have things that you don't want getting dusted, put some tarps, put some drop cloths down. Or if you have access to makerspace. Makerspaces are wonderful places to utilize. So keep that in mind. Okay, so earlier I mentioned the process, mapping out. So this is like where I made my vector image in Illustrator for that, and I cut out my pattern. And I basically use it to draw the main portion and use all those little pieces to cut out for the other details, to cut those out. Pay attention to your weight. Pay attention to your weight. These guys can get heavy really quickly. Even though we're using lightweight materials, it compounds. It gets heavier and heavier and heavier. Keep that in mind as you're building things. Also, your weight balance. Like for this sword, in the bottom is actually a ball hitch that is in the bottom piece of my hilt as a counterbalance to counter the weight here, because it's such a long sword. Holding it, it's just gonna go down. It still goes down because it's a big heavy sword, but the counterbalance is gonna help even the weight. In this one, there was a big bottom piece at the bottom. It was, the bottom piece is a giant spear. It was 3D printed. It was solid, 3D, like full infill, as a counterbalance to help with the weight distribution. So think about your weight distributions and make sure you have even weight distribution across your prop. Make a test piece first. Make a prototype. You want to do this twice. It'll help you work out the kinks, help you work out that weight distribution, especially if you're starting out. Make one first. Doesn't have to be perfect, but get the kinks worked out. Because maybe in your head, like it's how you're gonna attach pieces. In your head, it worked perfectly, but gravity sets in and it's not working. This will help you work out those kinks. So this is kind of the process. So those are the giant sheets. I cut out 2. Each one of these is 2 pieces together. As you can see, I had that center channel cut out to inlay the wooden dowels and cross them together. And then there it is cut together. Now, I used to use who's worked with EVA foam? Okay. Contact cement's the best, right? Yeah, you can't use that here. Can't use that here. It will eat through this foam. I used to use wood glue. The only thing with wood glue's great. This is with wood glue. That one is partially with wood glue. It takes 3 days to cure. So once you put them together, I clamp them down, put a bunch of heavy books on top of it. It takes 3 days. I recently discovered a new product through this company called Hot Wire Foam Factory. They make stuff specifically for cosplayers with this material. And it's called Foam Fusion. It's not expensive. This whole bottle is $9, which is about the same ounce to dollar ratio. It's about the same as Mod Podge. It's about the same as Mod Podge in terms of price. This only it sets up in an hour and takes 12 hours to cure. It is wonderful. Because as you see, I like covering my installation foam with EVA foam. That way I get a really nice, smooth, clean. You don't have to cover EVA. You can sand it down, prime it, it still looks good. I like the extra durability of having it covered in the EVA. It makes it a lot more durable. Like I can slam it, bump it. It can hit sharp things. Nothing's happening to it. It's not gonna get any damage to it. But before, it was really hard finding a glue to glue EVA to this foam because they don't want to mix. So I was using, yes, but I wouldn't use this as like contact cement. Like if you're doing EVA foam, EVA to EVA needs contact cement because that's doing a permanent chemical bond. This works good with things that you cannot use other glues for, like styrofoam. Just basically, insulation foam basically it's a polystyrene. It's a type of styrofoam. It's just a really fine fine particle, foam. It'll work on this kind of foam. This is what I use to make my snakes. This stuff. You can use it on this. It works on all different kinds. But this stuff is wonderful. I was using, I believe so. If they're not, I believe they do have another glue that does that. I think they have one that actually does that from their website. Before I was using Quick Seal, which is what I would use to glue EVA to this, which you can use Quick Seal to glue EVA foam to this stuff, but it takes a week to cure. Yeah, if you're cone crunching, because I'm always cone crunching, doesn't work out very well. And you also have to have it weighted down because it will peel up. And so, like that's how this was done. And she got left in the car for a little bit, and as you can see, I've got some little bubbles that have appeared. on her because it did, when I cured it, I didn't have weight right there, and so it didn't permanently bond, and so when I left it in the car and it heated up, it just popped off. There wasn't enough there. So this stuff though cures very quickly, so you don't have to wait it as long. You still need to make sure that you do keep it down. And then, yeah, so this stuff's really great, but you can use wood glue. Again, this just take forever to cure. This stuff is really, really fast. I use a router to cut out the insect, so I have a big router. Routers are great on this stuff. They do beautiful, beautiful work. That's also how these guys are cut out, is with a router. And then I started applying my EVA foam. So you know when I mentioned like all the colors that can be kind of a visual illusion? When you start looking for all your seams, that's what happens there. So you can see I've got all those different colors, and it can be hard to see what's what, and what's a clean seam, what's not a clean seam. And that's why as you're learning how to build props, it's really good to have something that you can go back and fix if you find a mistake that you didn't catch the first time. Especially if you're working on black EVA foam, it can be hard to see those mistakes. Gray foam is a little easier. Black can be sometimes a little hard. I'm also very blind. My vision is terrible. I don't usually work in my contacts because I can't see as well in my contacts. I have to wear my glasses. But it's still hard to see all those little errors. So that's why I like working with Mod Podge and not Classy Dip. For filling gaps, here's the other thing. A lot of cosplayers recommend Quick Seal. A lot of cosplayers swear by Quick Seal for filling gaps. I don't like Quick Seal. Again, it's cheap. It's a lot of work to finagle it. And it's like Classy Dip. Once it cures, you can't sand it. So if you didn't get it perfectly smoothed out with your finger, because you take Quick Seal, you put a bead on, you take your finger, you get it wet, and you smooth it out. If you didn't get it perfectly level, and you have some bumps or some waves, guess what? You can slightly wet sand it, but wet sanding it only does so much, and you could just rip it off completely because it's a silicone. So it doesn't permanently bond to the EVA, and it can't just peel right off. So I don't like using Quick Seal. I used Quick Seal in the beginning, and I hated it. It was so hard as a beginner to get it perfectly clean. And I spent hours trying to keep it wet, working little bits at a time, and it was just, and then I thought I got it perfectly smooth, started priming and realized I could see the seams. I could see where the Quick Seal was. And there's also a sheen difference. So even when you get it perfectly smooth, there's a slight sheen difference. Even on applying primers, if you didn't get it perfectly smooth, you're gonna see the sheen difference between the two. Classy Dip will make it so visible. My first Shishomaru armor that I made was, I used Classy Dip, used Quick Seal, and I could see, even though it was smooth, perfectly smooth, I could see the sheen difference. I could see exactly where my Quick Seal ended on my gaps. My favorite product to use is Gap Filler by Prop Monkey Studios. I discovered this about a year and a half ago. It used to be carried by TNT Cosplay. They're not around anymore. There's another company. If you just Google this, there's only one company that sells it. But I think actually, no, Prop Monkey actually sells it themselves now. They sell it themselves. This stuff is amazing. It's like an EVA paste. This jar is $25, which can seem expensive, but this stuff, a little goes a long way. I've made an entire suit of armor and a prop with just one jar. A little goes a long way. And I'll pass it around so you can see it. But you open it up, and it's a paste. It has kind of a weird smell to it, but it's non-toxic. It sands beautifully. So when you apply it just like you would Quick Seal. So you apply it, wet your finger, smooth it out, get it down, and then let it dry. It sets up in 1 to 24 hours. Before I start sanding, I like to wait at least 12 to 24 hours before I sand, but it dries very quickly. And you can sand it like a dream. It's wonderful, and it bonds really, really well to EVA. So that's how I go through. As you can see up there, all those white areas, that's all of the gap filler. So all of these little creases, wherever I have EVA meeting, I'm using the gap filler. So you have that perfectly smooth, and you guys can come up here and see, there is not a single, you're not gonna see any gaps. No gaps at all, it's perfectly seamless. This stuff is wonderful. And you can sand it, and then I go back and wet sand it, It's a dream. So if you want to see it, I'll pass it around. Another great one that you can use is called, and I like to use this to get really flexible things because gap filler can be a bit flexible, but it only has so much. If you have something really, really flexible, it can, before it's primed. So if you have something that's going to be, that you're not flexing a lot while you're working on it, it's fine, but if you're flexing it a lot and bending it when you're working, it will crack. Once it's sealed, it doesn't crack. But in the first stages, it can. Flexi filler is another good one. This one is like, it's more of a putty, I guess, is the way to describe it. You work it the exact same way as gap filler. Gap filler, you dry sand. This, you wet sand. That's the difference between them. So this you have to wet, you can't dry sand this, you have to wet sand this. That's dry sand. But this stuff works really good too. This was about $10 for this. I only use it a little bit, but I use it for my flexible stuff. Like I have a really flexible piece of armor. I'll use this. Here, pass this one in too. Oh. But I like that. You can open it. You can see how it kind of feels. Again, they last a long time. You don't need very much of it. But those are my personal favorite things to use on gaps. Again, they are very beginner friendly because you can sand them, and that's important to look at.
Do those also work on 3D prints?
I wouldn't, because they're made specifically for EVA. They're designed for EVA foam. For 3D prints, I like to use, to bond, I use JB Weld. And then to sand, you do a light sand, and then the automotive fillables primer, the sandable and fillable primer, you're just gonna start laying that on 3D prints. Just layer it, layer it, layer it, and then you're gonna sand the heck out of it and layer it on some more. So like typically what we do is we get the gray one and the black one. We do one layer of black, because I print in like crazy colors, like I'll do like pink. So we do that for a reason. So we have like a pink 3D print, lay a layer of black down, and then layer the gray. And we put like 10 coats. Like it takes a while, 10 coats, and you sand it. And when you hit the black, you know you're about to get to your PLA, so you want to stop sanding there. So by then, you should have all those layer lines gone. But you're gonna sand, and you're gonna start out at 320, and you're gonna ramp all the way up, and at the end, finish with 1,000. And you will have a perfectly smooth 3D print. It takes a lot of time. It's a lot of sanding. If you're not ready for sanding, making props is not going to be your favorite hobby, because I go through sandpaper I buy it in bulk at this point. I buy like the huge like contractor packs of sandpaper. For finishing, I do prefer the automotive. It's just, there's something about it. It just works better when you're doing finishing work. Regular, like if I'm using 120, 220, I just buy like the contractor packs from Home Depot that have like 100 sheets in them. But for my finishing work, I do prefer to have the automotive, and when you get up to 400, you want the one that's for wet sanding. So this one will allow wet sanding. And so I do prefer those. And when you do the automotive primer, then you get this nice clean gray thing. And this is where you can really start sanding down and really see where your imperfections are. When you're at this stage with the automotive primer, this is where any imperfections you have are going to come to light, and this is your chance to fix them. Let's see. Does anyone have any questions so far? Any questions? Let me make sure I hit everything. Let's see. Yeah. I will say gap filling is something that you don't want to overlook. It's really when you're looking at props, if you've ever made your prop and you're like, God, I followed the tutorial online, I did exactly what they did, it's just not coming out right. One, people who are making these props that are doing tutorials, they've been doing this for a long time. There's a lot of behind the scenes work, a lot of just wisdom they have, knowledge they've gained that you don't get to see from the other side of the screen. So don't let that discourage you, that yours is not looking exactly how theirs looks, or it doesn't come out perfectly crisp and clean with these nice lines. You're just starting, it takes time, so don't let it discourage you. This is something that you just have to, unfortunately, there's no like quick path to success. But these tools up here will make it better, because I'm completely self-taught. I've had to struggle and try to figure out why my props and armor don't look like the tutorial I just followed. And what am I doing wrong? Am I just not good at this? What's going on? And I kind of discovered, just through the wormholes of different things, some different materials that work really, really well and are a lot more beginner friendly than what I've seen out there in tutorials. They're a lot cheaper, they're easy to access, they're easy to use. Like the great thing is Classy Dip is toxic, Mod Podge is not. And a lot of people will knock Mod Podge, but I will preach this to the day I die. But you have to wet sand Mod Podge. If you do not wet sand Mod Podge, you're gonna get the crusties. You're gonna get the crusties, and that's what a lot of people don't like about Mod Podges. And what I mean by the crusties is when you sanded your EVA, you notice it gets the little fuzzies. When you put Mod Podge over it, they're gonna harden, and you're gonna have this like crusty gunk on the edges of your EVA. You have to wet sand those down, they will go right away. Just trust the process. Trust the process. It is very messy. It's very messy. I'll say that because it's going to get pasty and it's just going to start kind of reactivating the Mod Podge, which is what you want, but it's going to be kind of messy. Anyone have any questions or need help with any advice or props or anything?
So for any of the gap fillers you talked about, none of those are toxic or anything like
Nope.
that?
Nope. Gap filler specifically is non-toxic. Quick Seal isn't either. Again, if that's all you have, that's what you have access to, because Quick Seal is really cheap, it's easy to find. Great, you can use Quick Seal, and there's nothing wrong with using Quick Seal. It's just not the most beginner friendly. It takes a lot of work. If you are learning this process and all the different steps it takes to get to these kind of pieces, it's a lot of layers, a lot of time. If you try to shortcut or you forget a step with Quick Seal, you're gonna see it instantly. It's really hard to sand down, even though it says it's technically slightly wet sandable. It's still not very, very sandable. You have to really, you're gonna be applying a ton of the automotive primer to try to even it out. And it's gonna make you frustrated, and it's gonna make you just not wanna do it. These products make it a lot easier to manage. And with like the gap filler, I go through popsicle sticks like crazy. I get popsicle sticks. I scoop a little bit out and close the jar because it will air dry. It air dries quick. So to keep it good, I just scoop a little bit out with the popsicle sticks. I take a second one. I get like this little bitty dab, and then I set it. I'll push it into the crack, and then take my popsicle stick and drag it through the crack. That sounds wrong, but drag it through, and then I get my finger wet. Oops. I'll get my finger wet, and then run my finger over it to smooth it out more, and then just keep repeating that process all the way through all of my cracks. What is nice with gap filler too is you can build it up. So if you have something that's a bigger gap, or just a little seam, just a little bit of a bigger gap, as long as it's not too big, you can use that. Prop Monkey does make one that is for bigger cracks that you can get. You can also use clay foam. A lot of people use clay foam to fill their gaps. I did actually use clay foam on the edge of this sword to make this nice and clean. The only thing with clay foam is it's temperamental. It's very temperamental. I love clay foam for organic pieces, but if you want something really sharp and structured, it's really hard to get clay foam to be really even and symmetrical and get a nice crisp line. So when you're trying to like make these sharp edges, clay foam can be really difficult to do that. If you need something that's perfectly smooth, perfectly sculpted, again, clay foam is great for organic structures because it's lumpy, it's like a clay. And trying to work it out, it's a lot of work. You have to like wet your finger. It's a little bit more tedious than using the Quick Seal. It's probably the one you have to work the most. And so if you're in the beginning and you're trying to figure out how to manipulate this material, it can be very frustrating. It can be done. And I do use clay foam for big gaps. So like, if I put like a breastplate together and I have a gap it's closed in the front, but in the back I have a weak point because it's not fully, the bevels aren't fully connected, just because that happens sometimes, I will use clay foam in there to reinforce that. And it's great for reinforcing any kind of connection points you have that may be weak in the back. It's great for that. Any big gaps you need filled, it's great. Once you work with it, you can kind of learn how to manipulate it to get some clean things, but it takes a lot of time. So I don't always recommend it because it's not beginner friendly. Also, when you go to sand it, if you're not careful, it will just rip right off because it does not bond. It doesn't fully bond to EVA perfectly. So over a flat seam, it's not going to bond. And so when you go to take that Dremel, if you hit an edge of it, it will just peel it all up, and all that work, all the cure time, because it takes forever to cure, it takes days to cure, is gone, out the window. So I don't recommend it for beginners to use clay foam as a gap filler for that reason. Like use the other ones that, like, get your skills up so you're confident in building the basics, and then start going into like clay foams and things like that, because if you're still learning how to do the basics and you have something that you spent hours gap filling and then you sand it and all of it comes up, I've had it happen. I did a whole piece of armor. I was like, you know what? I saw that on TikTok. I'm gonna try it. It was my Paladin Sailor Moon armor the first time I was gap filling it. And I spent about 2 days gap filling it and let it cure for another 2 days. And then I went to sand it, and one of my greaves just peeled right off as I started sanding it. And I was just so defeated. And because I was waiting for my new jar of gap filler to come in. I'd gone through my first one. I was waiting for my new jar to come in, and I just couldn't wait. So I was like, I'll just use clay foam. I have it laying around. I ended up I just had to peel it all off and just wait for my gap filler. But I did use it for this, and it worked good for this, but I had to be very, very careful sanding that edge. Very, very careful. And I also made sure it was super, super smooth. So I've worked with clay foam enough now that I'm starting to figure it out and how to manipulate it how I need to, but still, for beginners, I just recommend staying with the other two options, because it'll just be a simpler process. Any other questions?
Earlier you mentioned like transportation and making designs modular. What tips do you have on making a design modular to like fit together?
So PVC is great for that. PVC, especially if you don't have like access to a wood shop, you don't have access to a lot of power tools, PVC is wonderful because all you need is some clamps and they have couplers. And so when you're looking at your design, you want to look at your prop and see, okay, where can I put a breakpoint? Where can I hide a breakpoint? Is there some kind of decorative piece? Is there something that I can, find a way to hide? Like, this is the second version of Ori. The first one, we did have it break apart because I didn't have my new car yet. Right here where this is, I had a break there and it screwed together. So the wood broke apart, it screwed together, and it was hidden by that little tail. So the tail just kind of came over and covered the seam of where those two wood pieces met.
But it did snap.
Yeah, it did. I did on the way. I was walking over to San Japan across the street, and a huge wind came through. That thing turned into a wind sail, and it swung it and stripped my screw out. So be careful with that.
Here now, there's a 3D printed piece that comes about this high.
Yeah.
So it can fit in the car, and it just slides on and stays on there pretty good.
Yeah.
Don't put brakes where you're going to be holding it.
Yes. Do not put your brakes where you're
I
going to
wouldn't
hold.
put a brake above right here.
Yeah. Don't put your brakes where you're going to hold it, because that's going to be a fracture point. So you do want to think about where your weight is. This one is a very unique prop in the sense of its weight distribution. It's pretty intense with the weight distribution. So brake points, you have to be really strategic with it. Most big props you see, their weight distribution isn't this insane. So you can put brake points, but I just wouldn't put it anywhere where you're going to be grabbing, because that automatically is going to be a easy flex point. Yeah.
So what you're saying is where your hands are, that should be like the strongest piece.
Yes, that needs to be the strongest point. Wherever your hands are needs to be the strongest point that you have. Oh, yes.
Hey, so what type of safety gear should you be using when doing this?
Yes. Thank you. That was the thing I needed to remind. Guys, PPE. I am the world's worst with PPE. I hate PPE, but I'm telling you, when you are working with this stuff, do not forego PPE. I wear glasses when I'm working, so only when I'm doing my router work will I wear safety glasses, because I have nice big glasses I wear. But a respirator, when you're working with this stuff, 100%. I was not for the longest time because I just hated wearing a mask. I hated it. I got bronchitis like 3 times in over 6 months. And the only thing that like coincided with it is I had been working on this prop without PPE on, without a respirator. When I was doing the sanding of this stuff, when I was doing the cutting of this stuff, because when you use I also have a hot knife, like an industrial hot knife to cut off big portions. It literally like liquefies, it melts this. It actually vaporizes it, like it vaporizes this stuff. This thing doesn't vaporize it as much, but it still does. And the fumes from this stuff are not good. They are toxic. The air is literally spicy. I'm not lying. It burns when this stuff burns. So please, 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 just get an N95 respirator. And they have to be the big one with the things on the either side. It can just be the N95 one that you get at the hardware stores. Huh? And be in a well-ventilated area. Because that's the problem. That's the reason I didn't wear PPE. I had got one of those big ones, the big respirators, and I got claustrophobic and I could not wear it. And I have a very big, well-ventilated space, but even then I was getting sick, and I finally just got the N95 ones you get at the hardware store that are the white ones, and that was enough. That was enough for this. I could breathe through it, air wasn't spicy anymore, and I didn't have any lung issues. Also, the stuff, when you're sanding this, it's very fine. It's a very fine dust. EVA can do it too. You should wear PPE when you do EVA, but that's up to you. You should take care of your lungs, but this stuff has a really fine particle that will get in your lungs. Like, I'd blow my nose and purple would come out. So please, when you're sanding this, wear a mask. If nothing else, if you don't wear a mask, working with any other material, do it with this. Luckily, all the other materials up here are non-toxic, but this stuff, thank you for reminding me of that. This stuff, yeah, very, very important. If you take anything away, do that. Because you don't want to get bronchitis.
So what kind of sealant do you use after you're done painting it all?
Honestly, it depends. So if I'm truly finished with it and I have time, I will 2K coat it. So if it's not flexible, so if it's a big prop like this, I'll put 2K, which is a 2-part mixer. It's a hardener. So it's a clear hardener, almost like
It's a clear coat for automotive.
yeah, it's an automotive.
It has a hardener, so
Yeah.
if you're using it, make sure it's not anything's gonna flex or it will break
Crack.
apart.
Yeah.
It'll crack.
I don't use it on armor. Only use it on things that are going to be rigid and not have any flex to it, but it will make them really.
All your clear coats are gonna have hardeners in them.
Yeah, most of your clear coats will. For armor, things that are flexible, there are some companies that make, like there's the Clad FX. They have their primer. They also have the flexible top coat. There's like companies that specialize with cosplay paints that make flexible top coats. And so those are the kind of ones you have to use. But for big props that are rigid, I do like to do a 2K coating on them because then they really will be indestructible. This one we finished, I finished painting on the way to the con, so she did not get a 2K coating. That one's not done yet. This one's about to go back and get fully sanded down because she is not completely finished yet. She's not fully sanded. She only got one coat of Mod Podge, her automotive primer. I'm about to go sand her completely back down. And that's the good thing about it. If you make it and you get to a con and you're like not fully satisfied with it, if you use the Mod Podge method, you can go home and just re-sand it. And you can keep improving it. Now once you put the 2K coating on, it's a done deal. That's the final thing. Once you put a 2K coat on, there is no getting that thing off. It is literally like car automotive sealant. But before then, you can keep sanding down, modifying, cleaning up as much as you want.
Is the 2K toxic?
Is 2K toxic?
2K is very toxic.
Yep. He does the 2K coating. I don't like messing with 2K.
It's automotive paint.
Yeah, it's automotive paint. Anytime you're dealing with any kind of aerosol, because it's an aerosol, it's like in a can, like aerosol. Anytime you're doing any kind of aerosol, you need to be doing a respirator or be outside in a very ventilated area, upwind, not downwind. But 2K, yeah, and it's something where you wanna be in a space like outside or somewhere that you don't care about whatever's around you, because whatever that 2K gets on, it's gonna harden on, and there's no getting it off. I only do 2K coatings when I have a fully finalized prop. Other than that, I usually don't do clear coats on most of my props. Like she doesn't have one, even though I've already competed with her. I've won. She's retired. She's here for demonstration. I'll put her other pieces on. She's gonna go on my prop wall. She's never gonna have she's never gonna have a coating. This one's probably never gonna have a coating either. And like she doesn't have a coating, and I slammed her into the stage twice. That is the only damage on her. I slammed her. I threw her down. That's the only damage I have on this weapon. So, and there's no coating. So I would say you can do a coating if you want. Armor pieces, I would do like either a Mod Podge on top or a flexible thing, just so your paint doesn't wear when you're moving. You don't want the paint to wear down. That's really it. When it comes to props though, it's really up to you. She also like damaged the wall on the escalator going up to WeebCon because she got caught in the escalator on the top wall, and we came back down and I bent the drywall. She didn't have any, and it was this part right here, and there's no damage. There's no damage on her. I did more damage to the wall, and there's no coating on this, so it's not gonna mess with your paint. So again, it's up to you. But I think the only thing I have that's 2K coated is my Paladin sword. My Paladin sword 2K coated. What do you mean 2K coat?
No, we don't ever have time.
Oh yeah, I have it. Yeah. No, Paladins.
Nope, didn't have time.
Oh. There you go. That's usually what happens because I am usually content crunching for competitions. So yeah, I don't put a lot of emphasis on top coats. They're kind of a personal, what do you want to do? Any other questions? No? Well, thank you guys so much for coming to my panel. If you have any questions or have any specifics, feel free to message me on Instagram. I am more than happy to help give any advice, give any tips. If you're not sure how you're going to engineer something, you have a prop like I want to make this, I don't know where to start, I don't even know how to begin this, like how to engineer this, shoot me a message, send me a picture of it, shoot me a message, and I'm happy to give you my advice on how I would start it to get you there. Feel free, if you have something that's not working, you're like, look, I did this, it's just this process is just not working, what am I doing wrong? I'm more than happy to help. So feel free to reach out to me. I like helping other cosplayers, I love helping. I struggled and had to do it the hard way, but I don't think everyone should have to do that. So I don't gatekeep, I will tell you all the errors I've made, all the secrets I've learned to help others. So thank you guys for joining my panel.